Hi again, and we've continued to make a few changes to the color. We made it a little bit more brighter and saturated. For now, that's going to be okay. At some point in the future, we might want to push it further into the background by using less saturation, but while we're working on it, that's fine. We can always change it. We'll also add just a little more smeariness to it, just because I wanted it to be a little more foggy looking. Alright, so let's go ahead and add a layer. In Howler, layers are always default to multiply mode. This is very convenient for glazing techniques. As we said, just about every painting media, including oils even, and acrylics, especially watercolors, are very translucent. You almost never in painting paint anything opaque. Say if you had a dark background and you wanted to, say you had a green background and you want to put a bright yellow flower on it, you wouldn't take yellow paint and paint that yellow on top of that green. All you would get would be a deeper green. You would not get yellow. To do that, you would actually lay down some white, some opaque white, such as gesso or gesso or whatever that stuff's called, which is basically the same stuff your canvases are primed with. It's a new surface basically you're putting on to create that white. It's basically a white pigment mixed with something like marble powder, which gives it some tooth, and it basically creates a new opaque area for you to work on. And then you go ahead and put that yellow on there, and then that yellow will be extremely bright yellow because it has that white behind it. So we're going to be using some of these techniques. As I said, we created a new layer, and we're going to go into the particle system, and we're just going to go ahead and load a preset. I'll give it some ambient light because we don't want it to be completely black or anything. And let's see what we got here. That's a good start. In future versions of Howler, you'll be able to easily change the scale. In older versions, there were some ways to do it, of course, using Z buffers and such. Not going to worry too much about that right now. That's another discussion. We're just talking about glazing at the moment, and knowing how to use the particle system is very useful. So we're just going to go ahead and paint some interesting shapes here. Some evergreens. Like such. And since this is going to be a background layer or a middle ground layer, we want to fade out the bottom of this. And all we have to do is erase it using the airbrush tool and a white color. We already have white selected. So we're just going to go ahead and go to the bottom and paint white over that, and we'll see the background behind it, as you see there. Doesn't have to be completely. That's a little too deep a color. We're going to fade this layer out slightly. You'll be able to see some of the background behind it, but that's fine. That's a typical technique you would get in, or look you would get in an actual painting. And I said we'd be using median filtering throughout this. It just takes some of the rendered look off of it, rearranges pixels a little bit, gives it more of a painted look. You don't have to use that. I like to use it. And when you do that, sharpening is also a good idea. Not 100%, that's too much. About half is fine. Alright, you can also at this point change the colors. Whoops. Change the colors any way you like. You can make it more blue. Just make sure you're not darkening that, otherwise you're going to change the look of the entire painting. Alright, I'll go with that. Now we're going to add another layer and do the same thing basically until we've completely filled in the entire painting. Going to particles, maybe load a nice big tree of some sort on this new layer. Start painting. And at some point we might start getting too dark. In fact, I think it's a little bit too big for what we're doing. This is kind of middle ground. Something big, but not that big. We might want to actually go in and erase some areas. And there's some ways we can do that. Using this ambient light and turning off shadows is one good way to do it. I'll put the color up to white. You can actually go, I'm on this middle layer, and erase some of this. It's kind of like having liquid frisket on your canvas. That's a type of rubber, like latex rubber that is liquefied, and you paint little areas with a brush, like tree branches and things, and then later on you can go and scrape that off once it's dried and you paint it over it, and it leaves kind of the original canvas underneath. And that's a great technique for creating light areas, because remember, we're not going to be painting opaque colors on this. We're painting translucent colors. Therefore, at some point you have to add some white or light back into it, and that's where that comes in very useful. So let's do that on this foreground layer, and you can see where we're going with that. Alright, so I'll go back to painting my darker colors as we were doing before, and just go ahead and add a few more of these trees. Another feature that's nice in the later versions of Howlers, you can flatten that, and then therefore they're no longer affected by that Z buffer. It kind of resets the Z buffer. New feature coming in the future. Let's add a few ligustrums in this foreground. It's not there. Let's see. Try there. And like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and use the airbrush tool and fade out this using white. Fade out the bottom part of this because we don't want it to be, completely opaque on the ground, that ground part. At some point, we're going to start painting grass in there as well. So when we come back, we'll start painting some grass into this. Maybe the very foreground will have some nice grass and some other types of foliage in it. So see you then.